Now, for more on the election, let's bring in political analyst Drew Fagan with the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Affairs firm Macmillan Vantage. Drew, the popular vote numbers from Elections Canada show only 500,000 votes separating Liberals from Conservatives. Are you surprised by how close this election turned out to be?
To a certain extent. About 10 days ago, the polling was showing a bigger gap, a lead for the Liberals. In the last week or so, polling had showed that it had gotten smaller. So a couple of points. What's interesting as well, and you mentioned this off the top, Matt, is that the two major parties got 85% of the vote. That actually hasn't happened since the 1930s. You know, we've seen in Western democracies, particularly in Europe, you know, a whole series of new parties form, whether they're regional parties or hard right parties, hard left parties. Political analysts, political scientists have been concerned about that, the splitting of the electorate in all sorts of countries. And the fact that as a result of that, the major parties don't broker to the same extent, bring people together. Last night we saw the two parties, the only two parties that have ever held power in Canada, win 85% of the vote. Of course, the NDP, you know, had a very bad night. Bloc Québécois numbers were down, Green numbers were down. That's a really interesting result, as well as the higher turnout, which really wasn't a surprise given the, you know, the almost existential issue of our relations with the United States.
It's a pretty remarkable turnaround, Drew, for the Liberals, who were really all but washed up when Trudeau stepped down. How much credit does Carney get for this win? But on the other side, how much should we really be crediting Donald Trump and his 51st state rhetoric?
Well, Mark Carney himself has said that were it not for the crisis caused by the re-election of Donald Trump and his tariffs and talk of annexation, since he may not have run for the Liberal leadership. Liberal Party is extremely good at changing leaders when it needs to and come together with a change. That's something the Conservative Party traditionally over the decades has not been as good at. So how you balance that out, Trump versus Carney in terms of credit, they kind of come together. Carney ran a good campaign, although again, in the last week or so, 10 days, I think the Conservatives made up support. Talk from Trump was a little quieter. There was a little less of that. So the election got back to the original issues we'd expected last fall, cost of living, housing prices, and those were helpful to the Conservatives.
With Pierre Poilievre failing to win his seat in Carleton, do you think he's going to ask another Tory MP to vacate so he can at least have a seat in the House?
I think he will. Support for him remains strong among Conservative voters, those who, you know, his support, look, 41%. You've seen a 20-point rise in the liberal support, but you haven't seen a reduction in Conservative support. Were it not for that big liberal surge, and that's a big if, obviously, 41% would give you a majority government, right? So the Liberals took it out of the NDP and the Bloc primarily the NDP. So although he didn't win power, he gained seats, at least 20 or so, and so his support is fairly strong, and among the population, Conservative voters extremely strong. I expect that in the fall, or maybe even earlier, he'll try to do that. The one challenge is an opposition leader doesn't have, you know, something nice to offer an MPP, a Senate seat, for example, or something like that to make way, but I think he'll find a way.
Drew, we're just about out of time, but I want to ask you about Jagmeet Singh. He delivered this very poignant speech. It was really a great speech last night, stepping down as party leader. And it reminded me, he's such a likable politician, yet, you know, he's the captain of a ship that really sunk last night. What lessons do you think the NDP can take forward as they try to rebuild?
They have faced this before. In 1974, after they were working together with Trudeau Sr. in a minority situation, they got squeezed right out. The same things happened here in addition because of the issue of the United States in the sense that Mark Carney was the person of the moment. They'll come back. They've faced this situation before. Tonight was particularly bad. There's no question about that, but it was the circumstances. High water mark in 2011, low water mark last night. I don't think they're going away.
All right, that's political analyst Drew Fagan. Drew, thank you so much for joining us as always.
Thanks, Matt.